The funny thing about growing up in a family of teachers is that it prepared some of my cousins well to be teachers, but some others got so disappointed by the education system that they dropped out of high school or college to go pursue their educations on their own. They dropped out of high school for the same basic reasons a lot of other people drop out. They felt the education system was never going to meet their needs. When you grow up being promised that the education system is going to make your life better, and you can see that it does make a lot of other people's lives better, but then days of being bored and discouraged by it stretch into weeks and months and years, you realize that it was designed by people who never anticipated that someone like you was going to try to be part of it. I've seen this story from both sides. I started on a bachelor's degree, but after 2 years I got so bored with it that I dropped out. I'd felt for a long time that I was just making do with an education system that was designed for other people. Back in high school, when my education was free, that kind of made sense. Now that I was being charged tens of thousands of dollars to go to college, it didn't. Later, I went to flight school and got certified as a flight instructor. I learned the same foundation in education as every certified teacher in the U.S. after I dropped out of college. And in case I need to remind anyone here, if you have a bachelor's degree, you're not qualified to have a first-hand perspective on why people don't get bachelor's degrees. Since I'm talking about science and the education system here, I'd like to point out that the scientific definition of a system is a pattern of cause and effect that makes itself keep happening. Now that we have this thing called the education system, which was designed with some students in mind, it's easy to say that the fact that these students graduate from it proves that it works, and to blame the ones who drop out for not trying hard enough. To grow up to be a teacher or professor, you have to graduate from the education system we have, and in the process, you learn to use the education system we have to teach the next generation of students. When my brother realized that's what was happening and decided to drop out of high school so he could spend his time reading about things like politics, economics, and psychology that obviously were affecting him, he hoped that the rumors and negative stereotypes that would go around school about him dropping out would help motivate other people to graduate if they just stuck with it. Education is the act of making the student's mental model of the world more closely correspond with reality. The success of education is measured by the increase in the student's ability to succeed at his or her own goals. If you're a certified teacher, you learned those definitions on the first day of your training, too. But what assumptions have people made about the world and students' goals that have become embedded in the education system? What mistakes did those people make in their assumptions, and how are they affecting us now? Education didn't begin with the education system. Education began with parents teaching their children. The education system professionalized and standardized that process with the goal that everyone could learn from people who were good at teaching. Our public education system was founded in the 19th century. It was based on ideas about intelligence and learning that were developed in the 18th century. The idea was that education is partly a right of citizens to learn valuable skills like reading, writing, and arithmetic, and partly a need for citizens to learn a common foundation of skills in order to work together as a nation. Both of those ideas were adaptations to the Industrial Revolution. The right to learn valuable skills meant the right to learn how to do the jobs that were available in the economic system that existed at the time. A big part of the need for a common foundation of skills was the need of employers to be able to find people to work in factories. The education system we have now started as a factory system for producing factory workers. But at the root of everything people do are feelings that are as old as our species. Every functional society has always seen the opportunity of their people to learn valuable skills as a right, and has seen the need for them to learn a common foundation of skills to be able to work together as a society. Ask any Native American teacher what their ancestors would have taught their children back in 1491, and you'll get the same answer. The United States isn't an industrial society anymore. Now we're a post-industrial society where we've exported many of our factory jobs to other countries. So why should we still treat our education system like a factory for producing factory workers? We still feel like we have the right to learn valuable skills, and we still feel we need a common foundation of skills to be able to work together. So how do we adapt that to the educational needs of the world we live in now? Now we have the internet bringing people together like never before. Now we have the environmental crisis threatening us like never before. It takes 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, but the world is changing so fast that it's hard for anyone to plan on what the job market is going to be like in 4 years from now. What we need more than anything now is creativity. Creativity means imagination combined with practical understanding. The public education system was founded in the 19th century, but the university system was founded in the 16th century. Some universities were founded long before that, like Oxford University in England in 1096 and Bologna University in Italy in 1088. But the education system that's used in universities now began in the 16th century. The university system is a product of the scientific revolution. The purpose of the scientific revolution was to figure out how things work. That led to the classification of information into fields of study. That's where our college majors came from. Now, think about what this means. The purpose of the public education system is to make students employable. That means teaching children things adults already know and that adults have planned on people knowing. That's better than not teaching children things adults know. Knowing that most of the children in our country are going to learn how to read makes it easy for us to plan on how people are going to get information they need. But now think about what happens when we combine education with mass production. It's easier to grade tests when each question has only one right answer. That's what makes standardized testing possible. Since that kind of teaching is easiest to fit into the education system, that's the kind of teaching the education system tends to favor. And that leads right back to the idea of using the education system as a factory for producing factory workers. When your employer tells you what he wants you to produce, there is only one right answer for you to give him. Teaching creativity is the main purpose of art class. Art doesn't happen without creativity. But there's more to art than creative writing, music, drawing, and theater. How many high schools offer dance classes? And how many high schools that aren't charter schools for artists offer dance classes? What would it even mean to teach dance classes in public school? How do you teach dancing to the public? How would you grade people on such an abstract thing? Before you can grade someone on something, you have to be able to imagine a way to measure their level of success at a definable goal. But we have gym classes in public school. We have classes where people get exercise and where they're expected to follow arbitrary rules about the best way to run around a field with a ball. We have a grading system for measuring people's success at that. The difference between gym class and dance class is that strength, coordination, endurance, and willingness to follow arbitrary rules is a valuable set of qualities for factory workers, but strength, coordination, endurance, and abstract creativity isn't a valuable set of qualities for factory workers. How many public high schools have you heard of where the principal is convinced that art classes are as important as math classes, or where that's the general consensus among students and their parents? When schools need to cut back their budgets for some reason, art classes are almost always the first to go. Science has come a long way since the scientific revolution. 500 years ago, science was one of many things people thought about. Science started with physics and then added chemistry, biology, psychology, and offshoots of those fields like geology and sociology. Then scientists started discovering connections between their fields and added new fields like biochemistry. In the 500 years since the different fields of study were established, science has gone from being its own field of study, or many fields of study, to being the connection among fields of study. Scientists haven't just discovered connections among fields of science, they've also discovered connections to fields that aren't science. People in other fields have discovered some connections among their fields, but not as many as scientists have discovered. Science connects to math class because science depends on math. Science connects to English class through the psychology of linguistics and through the psychology that underlies the patterns of decision-making characters use in literature. It also connects to foreign language classes through linguistics. Science connects to history class through the decisions people made throughout history and the situations they made their decisions in. Science connects to art class through the psychology of perception and through things like geology and human anatomy that make things look the way they do. Science connects to gym class through physiology. Science connects to wood shop class, metal shop class, and automotive shop class through the physics that make the materials and the machines in the shop work the way they do, and through the biology that makes the different kinds of wood grow the way they do. Some other fields overlap with each other. History overlaps with literature and art, but history class doesn't overlap with gym class. French class doesn't overlap with math class. That leads to 3 more problems. First, religious fundamentalists downplay the importance of scientific discoveries to make science seem a lot less valuable for understanding the world. Second, people in other fields downplay scientific discoveries to make their own fields seem more important compared to science. Third, people in other fields downplay scientific discoveries to make their own fields look more important compared to religion as a story of the world. The people who are the best at any field tend to be the people who are the most passionate about it and who think about it all the time. In high school, you can go from English class to math class to history class to science class to gym class and hear teachers get excited about their different subjects, and that seems like a pretty good balance of teachers making things seem important. People who believe in fundamentalist religions try to convince everyone that science is just one of many things people think about. What they really mean is that the things they personally are most passionate about are supposed to be more important than science. In the same basic way, an English teacher who talks about English as if it's the most important thing ever, by definition, talks about science as if it isn't the most important thing ever. This means they talk about alliteration or the writing style of William Faulkner as if they're more important than the discovery of reliable information. I'm sure we've all had a few teachers who really did feel that their subject was the most important. But many teachers feel that all the subjects in school are important and they're just teaching the one they're best at. Even so, the way the school day is divided into periods makes those teachers look a lot like the other ones because you only see them for 45 minutes every day, and every day they spend the whole 45 minutes talking about the same thing, math or English or whatever it is. That approach to education worked well 200 years ago. It still worked well 50 years ago. But today, that means we've built a whole industry on a bad habit. How do we change it now? After someone has gotten 20 or 30 or 40 years of professional experience with one way of doing something isn't a good time to try to convince them to try something new. And again, every certified teacher we have now graduated from the education system we have now. Today we have teachers in their 60s who the other teachers look up to because they've been teaching since the 1970s. If we started training teachers in a new style of education, we'd be sending new teachers in their 20s out to try to figure out how to make it work on their own, because they wouldn't have anyone with a career's worth of experience to help them or to look up to. Again, keeping things the way they are is easier than changing them because of things like this. From what I've seen of the education system, we seem to keep avoiding problems like this that arise from the changing role of science in society by making all the subjects in school seem equally important by making them seem equally unrelated to each other. The real lesson of science, which made science so revolutionary back in the 1500s, is how people discover reliable information. But to make other fields seem equally important to science by making all fields seem equally unrelated to each other, teachers have to downplay the importance of discovering reliable information and talk about science as if it's mainly a body of facts for students to memorize. It's really cool for 4th graders to move iron filings around on a piece of paper with a magnet, and eventually that leads to physics class in high school. But how much does anyone do to teach students to apply the critical thinking skills they learn in science class to anything else in life? Again, if you teach science in a way that only makes it useful in science class, you're not teaching science as a narrative. That brings us right back to the problem with art classes. Mass-producing things in factories, or otherwise producing consistent results that your employer can plan on selling, depends on learning how to do something someone else already knows how to do. Creativity means figuring out how to do things that haven't been done before. It's easier to plan an education system around getting students to memorize the right answers, but focusing on that approach discourages creativity. I can summarize this entire video in 5 words that every teacher knows. The positive transfer of learning. It means that by far the simplest, most direct, most efficient way to teach students is to teach them small ideas now that will build up to bigger ideas they'll need to learn later. That's opposed to teaching them ideas now that will conflict with ideas they'll need to learn later, which is called the negative transfer of learning. Teaching the connections among fields of study would make education both easier and better. But that would make science a lot more important to education, and many people, including some teachers, aren't prepared for that. Creativity depends on imagination and practical understanding. If students could get to a higher level of practical understanding, that would increase their creativity. And if they could get there more easily, that would leave more time for education that teaches them to use their imaginations. We have the connections among ideas. We have teachers who know that teaching connected ideas is easier and better than teaching disconnected ideas, and we have students and parents who want a better education system. That means that most of the pieces are in place to make this new education system start happening. The only real obstacle remaining is for enough people to agree that reorganizing the way information is presented would be worth the effort. That's what this series is about, so subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and stay tuned for more videos.